The world is watching one of the most dangerous maritime choke points on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz has once again become the center of global tension. This narrow passage connects the oil-rich Persian Gulf to international waters. Roughly one-fifth of the world's traded oil passes through this corridor every day. When the strait is threatened, global energy markets react almost immediately. In late March 2026, tensions escalated after a public statement by Donald Trump. Trump issued a 48-hour demand calling for the safe reopening of commercial shipping routes. The message was posted on Truth Social, where it quickly spread beyond his direct followers. Within minutes, major news outlets and financial markets began reacting to the statement. The ultimatum marked one of the sharpest rhetorical escalations in the current crisis. At the time of the statement, Trump was not serving as president but remained a major political figure in the United States. His comments still carried weight due to his influence on domestic politics and foreign policy debates. The statement warned that failure to reopen the strait could lead to military strikes against Iranian infrastructure. The infrastructure mentioned included power grids and energy facilities. Analysts noted that such targets are considered critical national assets. Strikes against them would likely affect civilian populations as well as military capabilities. Iranian officials responded within hours of the ultimatum becoming public. Leaders in Tehran rejected the demand and described it as a threat. They warned that any attack on Iranian territory would trigger broader retaliation. Among the possible responses mentioned was a complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Closing the strait is not a simple decision, but Iran has long developed the capability to disrupt traffic there. The waterway at its narrowest point is only about 21 miles wide. Tankers must travel through designated shipping lanes that are even narrower. These geographic constraints make the passage especially vulnerable to mines, missiles, and small boat attacks. The U.S. Navy has maintained a strong presence in the region for decades. Its mission has been to ensure freedom of navigation and protect commercial shipping. U.S. forces operate from bases in nearby countries including Bahrain. The Navy's Fifth Fleet is headquartered there. This fleet plays a central role in monitoring activity in the Persian Gulf. Any closure of the strait would immediately draw U.S. naval attention. The current crisis did not begin with the ultimatum. It grew out of weeks of escalating exchanges between Iran and Israel. These exchanges included missile strikes, drone attacks, and cyber operations. Both sides accused the other of targeting strategic assets. The risk of miscalculation increased with each successive strike. Washington, D.C. monitored the situation closely. Officials in the U.S. Department of Defense emphasized the importance of preventing the conflict from spreading. At the same time, they reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to protecting international shipping. Energy markets began pricing in the possibility of supply disruption. Oil futures rose as traders reacted to the uncertainty. The Strait of Hormuz has been a flashpoint before. During the Iran-Iraq War, both sides attacked oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. The United States eventually escorted reflagged Kuwaiti tankers to ensure safe passage. That historical precedent still shapes military planning today. Modern surveillance technology has improved, but the basic geography of the strait remains unchanged. This means that even a small number of attacks could disrupt shipping significantly. Insurance rates for vessels transiting the strait began to rise as tensions increased. Some shipping companies delayed or rerouted cargo in response. These decisions had ripple effects on global supply chains. Energy importing nations in Asia and Europe were particularly concerned. For the United States, the stakes are both strategic and economic. Although the U.S. now produces large amounts of its own oil, global prices still affect American consumers. Gasoline prices are influenced by international benchmarks such as Brent crude. When Brent prices rise, costs at U.S. gas stations often follow. This connection makes the Strait of Hormuz relevant even to drivers thousands of miles away. Political leaders in Washington understand how energy prices affect voters. Rising fuel costs can influence inflation and economic growth. As a result, stability in the strait is often framed as a national interest. Diplomatic efforts intensified behind the scenes as the 48-hour deadline approached. Regional mediators attempted to keep communication channels open between Tehran and Western governments. Countries such as Oman have historically played a quiet but important role in mediation. Omani officials have hosted back-channel talks during previous crises. Their geographic and political position allows them to maintain relations with multiple sides. In this crisis, diplomats work to reduce the risk of direct confrontation. Public statements, however, continued to escalate in tone. Social media amplified every new development. Statements from political figures spread globally within minutes. This rapid dissemination increased pressure on leaders to respond quickly. Military planners prefer time for careful assessment, but public deadlines shorten that window. The result can be a cycle of reaction rather than deliberate strategy. Analysts debated whether the ultimatum was intended as a negotiating tactic or a genuine warning. Some argued that strong language was meant to deter further Iranian actions. Others worried that public threats reduce flexibility for compromise. Iran's leadership framed the ultimatum as interference in its sovereign decisions. State media in Iran portrayed the statement as an example of American coercion. At the same time, Iranian officials emphasized their right to defend national territory. Military exercises in the Persian Gulf were reported in the days following the statement. These exercises were presented as routine but were closely watched by foreign intelligence services. The presence of fast attack craft and missile systems underscored Iran's asymmetric naval strategy. Rather than matching the U.S. Navy ship for ship, Iran relies on smaller, more numerous vessels. This approach is designed to exploit the confined waters of the strait. Swarm tactics could complicate efforts by larger warships to respond quickly. Naval mines are another tool that Iran has historically considered in crisis scenarios. Clearing mines from busy shipping lanes is a slow and dangerous process. Even the suspicion of mines can halt traffic until the area is declared safe. The U.S. and its allies maintain specialized mine countermeasure vessels for this reason. Military analysts frequently run simulations involving a temporary closure of the strait. These simulations show that even short disruptions can cause major economic shocks. Global oil reserves can cushion the impact, but only for a limited period. Strategic petroleum reserves in countries like the United States are designed for such emergencies. The International Energy Agency coordinates emergency stock releases among member states. This mechanism was used during previous supply disruptions, including the 2011 Libyan civil war. However, reserves are a temporary solution rather than a long-term fix. Prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz would require broader adjustments in global trade. Alternative pipelines exist, but their capacity is limited compared to tanker traffic. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have built routes that bypass the strait, yet they cannot carry all exported oil. This structural reality gives the strait enduring strategic importance. Financial markets reflect that importance in real time. Energy companies saw their stock prices fluctuate as headlines changed. Investors moved money into safer assets such as U.S. Treasury bonds. Back in Washington, lawmakers from both major parties called for restraint. Members of the United States Congress requested briefings on the evolving situation. Congressional oversight is required for sustained military operations. The U.S. Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war. While presidents can authorize limited strikes, prolonged conflict often requires legislative support. This constitutional framework adds another layer of complexity to crisis decision-making. Military commanders must prepare options while political leaders weigh legal and diplomatic constraints. The American public, meanwhile, receives information through a mix of official statements and media analysis. Cable news networks dedicated extensive coverage to the potential economic impact of a closure. Social media platforms carried both accurate reporting and unverified rumors. Fact-checking became crucial as false claims circulated online. Government agencies issued clarifications to prevent misinformation from spreading further. The speed of modern communication means that narratives can form before facts are confirmed. This reality has changed how crises unfold compared to earlier decades. In previous eras, governments could shape messaging more slowly and deliberately. Today, leaders often respond in real time to public reaction. The 48-hour deadline created a specific moment for the world to watch. Television networks prepared special coverage leading up to its expiration. Analysts were invited to discuss possible scenarios on air. Most emphasized that outcomes remained uncertain until official actions were taken. As the deadline approached, shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz continued but at reduced levels. Some tankers chose to wait in safer waters rather than risk entering a potential conflict zone. This hesitation alone was enough to tighten global supply. Oil traders closely monitored satellite data showing vessel movements. Maritime tracking services became a key source of real-time information. Insurance companies evaluated risk levels hour by hour. Premiums for war risk coverage rose sharply. These additional costs were ultimately passed along to buyers of the oil. The economic impact was therefore felt even without a single shot being fired in the strait itself. This illustrates how perception and risk can influence markets as much as actual events. Diplomats continued working behind closed doors as the clock ran down. Statements from various governments urged all sides to avoid steps that could escalate the conflict further. The United Nations called for respect for international maritime law. Freedom of navigation is considered a core principle of that legal framework. Any attempt to block an international strait could trigger broad international condemnation. Yet enforcement of such norms often depends on military capability. This reality underscores the strategic importance of naval power in maintaining global trade routes. The United States has long positioned itself as a guarantor of these routes. Whether it chooses to act in any given crisis depends on a mix of political, economic, and security considerations. As the deadline expired, the situation remained fluid rather than decisively resolved. No immediate large-scale military strikes were confirmed in the hours that followed. Markets stabilized slightly but remained volatile. Shipping companies continued to monitor official guidance from naval authorities. Analysts described the moment not as an endpoint but as part of an ongoing standoff. The crisis highlighted how interconnected modern economies have become. A narrow stretch of water thousands of miles away can influence fuel prices in American cities. It also demonstrated the growing role of social media in shaping international crises. Statements that once might have been delivered through formal diplomatic channels now reach the world instantly. This shift has accelerated the pace of global politics in ways leaders are still learning to manage. The Strait of Hormuz remains open for now, but its future continues to reflect the fragile balance between diplomacy, deterrence, and the global demand for energy.